Hi, thanks for joining. Welcome to the VENN number 5. It's July 21st, and the format for this one's going to be a little bit different. This session is being recorded so that you can watch it at your leisure, because July is a very hard time to get people to come out to a workshop. My name is Jen Arbo. I am the Economic Development Coordinator and the person who organizes the VENN workshops for the City of New Westminster. I wanted to let you know that our next VENN is going to be held September 22nd. It will be with Lily Nickel, who is the manager of the New Westminster Farmers Market, and she'll be talking about social media and how to grow your audience, how to find the right channels, and really, how to try and excel as a nonprofit with limited resources doing social media. I also wanted to announce about our bursary program. So we have a bursary program that has been operating for a couple months now. It allows for nonprofits to sign up for an open enrollment workshop at Vantage Point, which is in generally their online workshops or one of their labs, and that's at no cost to you. And the city has this program running, and if you're interested in those details, just please do give me an email at jarbo@newscity.ca. So without further ado, we'll get started talking about newsletters and some of the basics. Just give me a second to share my screen. So again, welcome, and let's get started. If you have questions after watching this, please do feel free to email me, and I'm happy to answer your questions. So who am I? I'm your host, Jen Arbo. Like I said, I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for the City of New Westminster, and I plan these VENN events. I've been self-employed previous to working at the city for about 10 years. I worked as a consultant mainly with small businesses and nonprofits, and I did focus on the City of New Westminster in my work. I am the author of a few newsletters in New West, including the Invest New West newsletter, which is a newsletter that the Economic Development Office puts out with lots of resources and tips. I also participate in something I made up called the Great Unsubscribe. Every November, I reevaluate every single newsletter that comes into my inbox. Last year, I received 75 newsletters in November, if you can believe it, and I only remained subscribed to 17. By now, I'm actually a little bit, I think I've been added to about 40 or so. So they creep up no matter what you do. So today we're going to cover just the very basics, and then I'll give you some ideas about extending. And I wanted to mention that there's probably a lot of jargon in the kind of newsletter world. So during my presentation, I'm going to try really hard to use plain language and say out acronyms in their longer format. If you don't know, you're welcome to leave a comment or you're welcome to email me, and I'll make sure that I explain it. So first, I want to talk about CASL, or the Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation. This is a piece of legislation that was brought in 2014. It was created specifically to fight spam in electronic forms as opposed to print or what have you. Since it was brought in, Canadians have seen a drop of about 30% of their spam into their inboxes, which is good. And the quite generically named Spam Reporting Center receives about 5,000 complaints a week of spam, mostly related to emailed spam, but text spam and SMS spam is also on the rise. CASL has caused companies to be much more disciplined in the way that they manage their electronic marketing programs. And as a result, things like open and click-through rates, which we'll talk about shortly, have definitely risen, and bounce rates, another term we'll talk about soon, have dropped. So CASL's been really important, and it does provide some sort of rules about what you can and can't do when it comes to CASL. So I want to talk about some of the basics. You can do a way deeper dive into CASL if you'd like, and there are workshops that are put on with some regularity that really dig into the nitty gritty of it. But sort of the basics are what's the difference between implied and express consent. So express consent means you have written or verbal consent to send things and you have a record of it. That's a really important part of it. So if you can get it written, whether it's a sign-up sheet or at an event, or whether it's a sign-up piece on your website, express consent is absolutely the best way to participate. Express consent isn't limited by a term, and it's valid until the consent is withdrawn, whether they unsubscribe or they send you an email and say, take me off the list. Implied consent's a little bit trickier. It's time limited. You need to have an existing business relationship to send anything to someone. So for example, if I bought a belt from you, you could email me within 2 years if I bought it. But if I only emailed you and asked about the price of a belt, you can only send me an email for 6 months after an inquiry. If they're a donor, a volunteer, or a member of your nonprofit, you have up to 2 years to email them. Again, if they ask for you to stop emailing them, you have to. So implied consent can actually become express consent. So it's really ideal to try and obtain express consent, whether that's through a campaign where you ask a person to, for example, update their contact information, or you email them directly and ask, is it okay if I add you to the mailing list? And then you keep a record of them saying yes. Contact information on whatever you mail has to be valid for at least 6 weeks. So if you're moving, you need to make sure you update all your contact information on your next mail out. You need to make it clear, you need to make it accessible so that it's very obvious what your contact information is. And that does include a valid mailing address as well. You need to also make it easy and simple to opt out. So that's kind of a piece like an unsubscribe button or reply to this email and say unsubscribe. But most users say that they prefer an unsubscribe button because they don't necessarily want to acknowledge that they're unsubscribing. So I want to talk a little bit about some tools and platforms. So you should take your time when you're choosing your platform or your tool that you're going to use to send your newsletter. So what do you need? What resources do you already have? Does the tool do the work of helping you remain CASEL compliant? Does it offer add-ons like stock imagery for free, for example, or at a low price? Does it have integrations with all of your social media channels? And are there special features that are really useful to you? For some people, being able to do A/B testing, which means you send one version of the newsletter to one group and one version of the newsletter to a different group, and you find out how they respond. So A/B testing can be useful, but maybe it's not something you need. So generally, whatever tool or platform or any of these pieces, they are write-offable expenses under the sort of heading of marketing, but your accountant will tell you how to do that. There are so many different tools and platforms out there to choose from. It can be really overwhelming. So I reiterate, please do take your time and think through, like, what do you actually need? And if you don't quite know what you need yet, start keeping a list of things that you like when you see other emails. So if you get an email in your inbox and you're like, wow, this one's great, it always has great photography, you have to think about whether or not that photography is available to you by using a tool or platform. Really common ones might be MailChimp, Sendout. There's quite a few out there. Constant Contact is a common one as well, but there's a lot of new up and coming ones, and a little bit of Google, a little bit of asking around from other people as to what they're using, and pay attention to the footers of the ones that you get in your inbox that you like the way they look, because a lot of times that footer will contain information about how it was sent to you. So I really don't recommend that you start a newsletter if you haven't given much thought into what the goal or purpose is. So you can determine this a couple of ways. So you can ask your existing customers. So do a survey, put out some social media posts, ask them what they want. You can ask your board, your investors, or your funders what they think. And you should really have one or two purposes or goals in mind. I wouldn't have more than three. More than three, it's just going to get muddy about what you're actually trying to do. And it's really hard to kind of connect the dots between what you want to do and what you are required to do in order to get there. So it's really important to kind of be as focused as you possibly can. If your goals and purposes are really broad, you need to do a little bit of work to prioritize them and figure out exactly what the purpose of the newsletter is. So some possible reasons that you might put together a newsletter is because you want to share some behind the scenes info. Maybe you're a restaurant and your customers have been asking for staff spotlights or want to know more about the cooking. Maybe it's to a VIP list that you like to offer some discounts to that you wouldn't offer to someone else. Maybe it's specifically for sales. Maybe you want to create or maintain relationships that you don't have in another way. Or maybe you're looking to solicit donations or do some proactive outreach. There's a lot of different reasons why you might want a newsletter, and it's important that you take some time and validate what that purpose or the goal is. So let's talk a little bit about audience. So do you already have an existing list of email addresses that you have consent for? That's a big one. If you've already got an existing list that you've been emailing, for example, kind of haphazardly or in an ad hoc way, well, you're already started there. And who is that audience? Is that your customers? Is that people who've donated to you? You have to kind of think through, who are you talking to now? And who do you want to talk to? So those two lists might be a bit different. So for example, right now you might have a lot of supporters who are on an email list, but you might not have a lot of donors on the email list, and you want to see more of those donors. And so that might also help inform your purpose as well, is that you're trying to convert people who, support your mission, but haven't necessarily made a donation. So once you've chosen your platform, you're going to upload them up into the platform. And a lot of them will let you do a bulk upload using a CSV, which stands for comma separated values. You can often use tags to organize the contacts. Some platforms will call it groups, some will call it categories, some will say sublists. It depends on the language. Most of the platforms also have like FAQs to kind of walk you through the step of uploading and bulk importing your first list for your audience. So also check in, is this the way that the audience wants to be communicated with? Have they said they want to receive a newsletter or emails from you? So that's an important point as well. You can grow your audience as well by adding sign-up forms to your social media or your website, or you can put a good old clipboard on the counter as people come in and ask for them to sign up. Just make sure that you protect their information and that you keep a record that they have signed up. So what do you have to invest into a newsletter? Well, there's three things: your time, your talent, and your treasure. And it may not be that one person in your organization has all three of those things. So maybe you have somebody who has oodles of time, but feels that they don't know how to write these things. Or maybe it might be that you have someone who's willing to carve out some budget for this, but doesn't have any time. So you have to kind of figure it out. And it's quite frequently, you're only going to have two. So you need two to operate. And let's talk a little bit about the model of good, fast, and cheap. So recently, someone in my family bought a new bicycle, and you have to think about, do you want quality? Do you want to get it fast? And do you want it to be inexpensive? Because you're not going to get all three of those things. And it often is the same with time, talent, and treasure. You need to pick two that are priority to you and focus on whether or not you have those resources to invest. And it might simply be that you end up hiring someone to do this work for you if you don't have it. So in terms of style, layout, and function, I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's really up to you. But I will say that you should be consistent as much as you possibly can. You should take your time to set it up the way that you want. And if you don't have clear branding yet, say you're a very new nonprofit society that's just started and you don't yet even have a logo, go for very clean, high readability. So go plain and clean and just be simple. That could be plain text, that could be, headings, but no logo. There's lots you can do. So whatever you choose, whether when you're setting up your style and your layout, whether that's boxes, whether that's, pictures, just make sure that you're consistent every issue that you send out. All right, so let's talk about content a little bit. So content is a bit of a fascinating one. Content streams is what I tend to call them. You could also call them topical areas, but essentially they are things that are relevant to your business or nonprofit, and they'll help guide you when you're developing content. So for example, if you got a shoe store, content streams could be brands you carry, sizing and fit tips, that kind of thing. So you could have these sort of like different categories that you consistently and regularly talk to. If you're a nonprofit that say works in childhood education, your content streams might be a little bit different. So ideas there might be staff spotlights or ideas for your clients to carry on the play at home or park highlights of the favorite parks that you visit. So consistency is really important, and I would try to keep it as tight as you can so that you are sharing the stuff that you know that your audience really wants to see. definitely keep a planning document and definitely archive all of this so that you can follow along and see what you're doing. So, in this issue, you did this kind of content, this kind of content, this kind of content, and next issue, this kind of content, this kind of content, this kind of content. And if you kind of have a little bit of an idea, I use color coding because I'm a really visual person. So I prefer to use to keep it with color coding. But overall, no matter what, keep it fresh. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between storytelling and news reporting. So storytelling and news reporting have different feels to them when you say them. So here's two things. On July 21st, Jen delivered a presentation about newsletters versus Jen enjoyed giving a presentation to people about newsletters. She had a lot of fun creating all the animations to make it more interesting. Which one is a story and which one is just news? Obviously, the second one is much more about storytelling because it personalized my experience and it personalized the parts that I was having a lot of fun with. I also want to talk a little bit about your persona. So you don't have to go as deep as creating a muse or a corporate persona or anything like that. But just think a little bit about what the voice is that you want to have. Is it super neutral? Is it perky? Is it friendly? Is it funny? Is it very plain? So think through, and this is best done if you can get a group of people together to kind of have the conversation about what the voice should really be. So absolutely think through what it is. And no matter what, you need to bring it back to the purpose because the purpose is the thing that's going to actually tell you whether or not you want to storytell versus report news and what kind of persona that you want. Frequency. Let's talk about frequency. So no matter what you're going to do, you're going to set it up and you're going to decide that, you're going to do a weekly newsletter, whatever it is. But the reality is that after you've done this, you'll probably end up tweaking it. So we'll be talking about metrics and evaluation in a moment, but your frequency is dictated by two things. So what do your readers want to see? So you can ask them or you can review their behavior based on what they click on. And how much time do you have to offer and how much content do you have to offer? So you can say you'd like to do a monthly newsletter because you know you can offer that. But if your readers are asking for a weekly newsletter, that makes it a little bit harder if you don't have the resources to offer it. And you'll have to try and find the balance between the two. All right, so now what? How do you extend some of the skills that we've learned, the basics? So first, I want to talk a little bit about how you can grow your audience. And one of the things we need to kind of touch on is the difference between paid, earned, and owned media. So there's different ways of growing your audience, and some of them require you to invest, and some of them require you to simply exist. So paid media would be paid ads or print ads, for example, in the local newspaper. So promoting your newsletter through paid ads on social media is one way that you can do it through a paid channel. Your earned is a little different. So one of the ways you could do that is to run a contest asking the current subscribers to forward to their friends. So you're earning them doing the media by having some sort of small incentive. And then owned, you need to make sure it's integrated and that you promote it exists. So if you've already got a website and you've already got social media channels and you've got a brick and mortar shop, for example, make sure you got a poster up. Make sure you're telling people about it because these are already things that you own and that you're investing in. No matter what, deliver what you promise. So if you say, please sign up for our newsletter, we won't sell your info and we send every 2 weeks. And typically we do this, and this, and sometimes throw in a few surprises, stick to that. You could also be a little bit more generic and say, please sign up. We won't sell your info. We'll send something every 2 weeks, but we might change it up in the future and you can always take back your consent. So, set the expectation and deliver what you promise. So metrics are kind of a fuzzy area that a lot of people really struggle with. And so this is where there's a little bit more of jargon. So I want to talk a little bit about what some of the the jargony bits are. So on my list here, I've got bounce rate, open rate, click-through rate, or the CTR, forwards, and then unsubscribe. So let's talk a bit about those. So your bounce rate is essentially the percentage of email addresses in the mailing list that did not receive the message because the recipient's mail server returned them. So that means it can't be delivered to the email address. Your open rate is who opened up your email. It's not, I do need to point out that there are a number of email programs that now have automatic filters that will take a newsletter and plunk it straight into a folder. And sometimes that won't show up in your open rate. So just be mindful that that sort of auto archiving or auto filing of your newsletter may impact your open rate. But I mean, really, we're going to be looking at the averages here. We're not going to be looking at each individual person. Your averages also will vary greatly by sector or by your target, and your platform generally will tell you what others in your sector are doing. They don't all do that, but most of them do. Your click-through rate shows you the engagement of your email. So unlike a click to open rate, your click-through rate measures the activity out of everyone who received an email in their inbox, and it provides insight into what percentage of your audience is interested in your content over time. What it means is that they clicked on something and kept going. Those are good because that means that they're actually interested and that they're looking at stuff. Forwards are a tricky one. Not every platform will tell you how your item was forwarded. And if a person forwarded by, say, printing it out and giving it to someone, or sending via text message instead of email, or changing the platform, you may not know about it. And I want to touch on unsubscribes. I say here, unsubscribes are not the worst, and they really are not the worst. Unsubscribes, tell you what readers actually want to see. It means that people who actually want to see your content are staying, and you want the ones who are meaningfully engaged in and consuming what you send. So unsubscribes aren't bad. It also helps you remain compliant to CASL, and it also gives you the opportunity to kind of clean up your list and make sure that the people who want to see it are seeing it, and that you're not just having false numbers. I know it is unfortunate sometimes that people kind of see the number of subscribers as the be-all end-all metric. It's generally not. If you've got 20 super engaged subscribers versus 200 passive subscribers that never click on anything and that don't open anything, you want that first list. You don't want the 200, you want the 20. So as you send your newsletters, you want to make sure that you're taking what you learn through looking at your metrics or the reports or whatever the platform gives you and adapting your newsletter. So what you might find is that nobody ever clicks on any of the behind the scenes stories, or that nobody ever clicks on any of the photos. That's not likely to happen. Everybody generally loves photos, especially video. Video and images are two of the most popular types of content without a doubt. But if you're finding that there's a certain kind of content that nobody ever clicks on, stop sending it. Another option to consider is a survey to ask what people want to read. So with the Invest in US newsletter, one of the things I'm planning for the fall is to send a survey to the subscribers. There's about 825 of them, and to say, is this meeting your needs? What other types of content would you like me to put resources into resourcing for you? What would you like me to write about? What would you like me to find information on? Right now, I put in things like grant opportunities and opportunities for businesses to participate in programs that are either low cost or no cost. And I also like to provide a shout out to all the new businesses in Westminster. So I have a few things that I put in there on a regular basis, but maybe there's a bit of content that I'm missing out on and that people really want. So the best thing for me to do is to ask them. So in the fall, if you're a subscriber to the Invest in US newsletter, you'll see a survey that asks a little bit about what you want to see. It's okay to ask. Don't expect huge returns on a survey asking what people want to see, because if people don't have a strong opinion, generally they're not going to fill it out. All right, so what do you need? Well, first of all, like I mentioned, the tools There's so many of them. The platforms, there's so many of them. Some that I found to be really valuable is Unsplash, which is a place where you can get some free images, and Pexels is another one as well. Canva, which I actually used to make this great presentation you're looking at with all these cool animations, is another one. Canva has both an entry level and a pro level, and the pro level is really affordable. It's they've got a promotion on right now, and I think it's less than $10 a month. So Canva is definitely something to consider if you don't have an in-house graphic designer and don't have the resources to have an in-house graphic designer. Although I will always put in a plug for a professional graphic designer whenever you have the opportunity. Also, take photos. The phones that we carry around these days are absolutely high quality cameras, and take lots of photos. Take photos, ask permission to take photos, keep a photo waiver on you if you can, especially if you're working in a setting where you're taking sort of marketing type photos of people. Make sure you've got waivers, but you can take editorial photos anywhere you want, basically, and take photos that are interesting and show off either your business or your nonprofit. So take tons of photos. You might want to consider having a Google Drive or using Dropbox or some other sort of cloud-based storage space. So that might be a cost as well that you have to consider. So those are the basics. I hope you found this useful. I'm absolutely happy to take any questions via email since this is being recorded. You can email me at jarbo@newscity.ca. You can send in your questions. I'm happy to answer them one-on-one to you. We will be uploading this video to our YouTube channel, and we can also look at helping with questions in the comments of our YouTube video channel. And just a reminder that our next VENN is September 22nd, featuring Lily Nickel from the New Westminster Farmers Market, and we look forward to seeing you then. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording. So have a great time doing whatever you're doing this summer, and we hope we see you in September.